Buenos días a todos. Son las 6 de la mañana en Panamá, mi primer programa del año. Estoy con el señor Kenneth Rijock. Es un experto en crímenes financieros, lavado de dinero, es asesor para múltiples gobiernos y agencias federales del gobierno de los Estados Unidos, como el FBI. Tenemos el placer y el gusto de tenerlo. Incluso tiene libros sobre el lavado de dinero, es un experto. Vamos a preguntarle sobre crímenes financieros, lavado de dinero y los papeles de Panamá. Mr. Rijock, welcome to my first program of this year. How are you, sir?
Fine. Thank you, Luis. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you to you. You are very kind with the difference to accept my invitation. Sir, what is your opinion in U.S. about financial system of Panama?
Well, that's a very detailed question, and it probably requires answers on a number of different subjects. First of all, if we talk about the Panamanian banking system, while I find it to be generally very efficient, the issues of corruption have clouded the system for decades. Remember, I'm a financial crime consultant, and it's a sore point in the United States and in the rest of the compliance world that you rarely, if ever, see a bank charged with money laundering. The only time that ever happens is if somebody in the government, frankly, wants to close the bank down. But for violations of the money laundering law, that never happens. So basically, what we have is an open season in the marketplace, which means that people coming to Panama with the proceeds of crime are free to invest it in the local banks at their own convenience. That's a real problem because the rest of the world subscribes to what we call banking best practices. Banking best practices include know your customer, meaning that the source of funds and the source of the customer's wealth must be identified and it must be legitimate. And candidly, that generally doesn't happen in the Panamanian banking system. That's our first problem. The second problem, of course, is although Panama has a number of very competent and ethical lawyers, there's a rather large contingency who have no problems with violating a number of the laws, including the commission of a number of financial crimes. That's probably due in part to the fact that there is little or no enforcement of professional ethics in Panama, as well as the fact that an individual can find himself with a law license, licenciado, a law license, through a means in which he doesn't actually receive a legal education, but candidly obtains a degree and then obtains a license to practice law. So that's the second part of the perfect storm. The third part, of course, is that Panama has a long history of accepting flight capital or dirty money, principally from Colombia and Venezuela, which they know or should have known is, of course, the proceeds of crime. Until the last couple of years, Panama was a lucrative place in which Venezuelan flight capital could be deposited there and actually carried in cash, dinero en efectivo, so that no questions were asked as to the source of funds. While some of the banks took some steps to identify their customers, by and large, most of the dirty Venezuelan money came into the country with little or no inspection. And frankly, it was welcomed even by people at the level of ministers of finance. I hope that basically gives you a thumbnail sketch of the problems. But as you can see, what's currently happening in Panama is that the economy has taken a rather serious hit from basically the world's investors giving the country a wide berth for a number of reasons, some of which I've told you. another of which that there are now offshore financial centers that appear to be much more user-friendly than Panama. So if you roll all that together, you find out that Panama's compliance problems are basically the source of much of its issues in the banking system.
Thank you, sir. Para mis espectadores, voy a dejar el blog sobre crímenes financieros de Mr. Rijock, el link de su libro y un pequeño contacto para que puedan contactarlo y tener toda la información de él. Mr. Rijock, for example,
Sir.
for me, I'm lawyer. I have my personal account for more than 20 years in my bank. This is a most famous bank and serious bank in Panama. It's a renowned node bank and international, and Panama is the famous bank, most famous bank. For me, for open an account of my own company, the process duration is 1 month for open my account. Give or papers, documentation, reference is 1 month for me for my new company. Okay, why in US and other countries it's so easy for companies in offshore companies, in your experience, open new accounts, bank accounts in Panama? I suppose you speak about corruption. Is true?
Well, the problem in Panama is that the people who really get hurt are the legitimate businessmen and professionals. The criminal depositors manage to find a financial institution in Panama that they can work with, which will ask no questions and take their money, frankly, without any compliance whatsoever. But as a consequence of that, legitimate businesses and legitimate professionals have to suffer in Panama because legitimate banks and honest compliance officers will then go the whole 9 yards in which to basically qualify you as a customer. So that's the problem, is that the financial crime in Panama hurts everybody, hurts all the honest business people, and causes these huge delays. Frankly, corruption is part of the issue, and the lack of corruption means that it's going to take longer for an individual to open a bank account. Frankly, it's much faster in the United States because, to be honest, compliance is on a much higher plane there. And individuals who don't comply with the law, and banks in the United States which do not comply with our anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing laws, find themselves fined millions and millions of dollars or worse.
Okay, for example, in Panama have new laws since 2015 of know or customer and requirements. For example, in Panama, the lawyer, in my case, need know your customer, the final beneficiary, the owner of the company, reference, IDs. If don't have this information, the authority that regulated my agente residente function, the sanctions are starting at $5,000 to $1 million. It's very, very difficult for the lawyers now in Panama work about and form new companies. The sanctions are very high. For this reason, many lawyers in Panama stop give these services. Okay. What is the reason the Panama Papers? I see you in Russia Today and other interviews have many theories. The people, it's a Russian intelligence operation, are leak of a whistleblower or something. What really happened in your opinion with Panama Papers?
Well, the point is that, remember, Panama enjoys the status of being an offshore tax haven or an offshore financial center, which means that if a person was to form a corporation in Panama and earn his profits outside the republic, there would be no effective taxation within the country, which qualifies it technically as a tax haven. And legitimate business people flocked to Panama for many years to take advantage of that benefit. However, people who had criminal proceeds also came to Panama, and a number of, unfortunately, unethical law firms made a lucrative business out of serving those customers, seeing that they had accounts open and that their money, whether it was the proceeds of corruption or the proceeds of crime, was deposited and laundered through Panamanian banks. So the Panama Papers reflect the criminal intent of a minority of the legal profession, but unfortunately, a significant minority. And as such, when the truth came out and the legitimate financial world learned about it, they started moving away from Panama, which was to the damage and detriment of the country's economy.
Okay, I understand. I see the interviews. I speak with the lawyers of Mossack Fonseca. I'm a criminal lawyer. And I hear, tell me the people, these persons never commit a crime, okay? I see the investigations and other lawyers don't have the same opinion. No, these persons are victims, are no crime. Okay. If have one case of crime are sorry, my English is very bad, are a problem. Two are coincidence, but many a serial companies for persons in the dark side of the commerce. This is not a coincidence. I suppose the normal function of a law firm, this is not normal. In Panama, you have information about other law firms or other lawyers that now continue providing services for the criminal people? Sorry?
Well, here's the problem in Panama. Individuals who are presently or formerly in a foreign government or who were in a position where they had access to government funds, whether they are government officials in a foreign country, heads of a charity, senior military leaders, leaders of government-owned corporations. Those are all what we call politically opposed, we call them PEPs,
Yes.
for politically exposed persons. Now, a PEP requires what is called enhanced due diligence, not ordinary due diligence, which means that even though the person has never been charged with the crime, that the level of investigation of his background before accepting his business must be extremely high. And if any misconduct is found, he must never be accepted as a client, even though he has no criminal record. And that's the problem, that a Panamanian lawyer only generally conducts superficial due diligence because if it turns out later that he is representing somebody who is a career criminal, he's not going to be charged in Panama. He's not going to suffer any negative consequences by his actions, because the government, frankly, leaves the professional class of attorneys alone and relies on them to enforce their own ethics, which I'm sad to say they don't do. So here's the problem. Without enhanced due diligence of a foreign customer, you'll never really know who the person is.
Okay. You know the case of Wall Street stock house in Panama?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You know the case of Wall Street stock house in Panama?
Yes, sir.
You can tell me, speak me about this case.
Well, the point is this, that even when a customer comes in and has a certain degree of legitimacy, that it's up to the law firm that is actually accepting his business, that they provide enhanced due diligence in an investigation. Because frankly, people who come in with professional support from another country are usually very well prepared. They have what's called a cover story. They say that they are inherited wealth or that they are the owner of a corporation. But in truth and in fact, they may be a general in a foreign country where there's rampant corruption. They may be the head of a charity in which they have stolen money, or most likely, they're a minor government official or a relative is, and those people have put their hands on government funds and are now spiriting them out of the country and wanting to hide and launder them in Panama. So the stories are all the same. They really don't change too much, but it's all about whether or not the Panamanian lawyer will seek out the truth and be a gatekeeper to decide who opens a bank account in Panama, who gets a corporation, and who doesn't. Remember, by law, only attorneys in Panama can form corporations. So they have a monopoly on that industry. And without a corporation, you have a real problem opening up a bank account if you're not a local Panamanian citizen. So to summarize it, it's all about a lack of due diligence and unfortunately, to some degree, greed.
Okay. You know the Financial Pacific case. You hear about this?
Yeah, yes, sir. And I've written about it extensively on my blog.
Excellent. Nuevamente les aviso a todos mis las personas que nos ven en este video que el blog de Mr. Rijock va a estar en la descripción de este video. Mr. Rijock, in this case of Financial Pacific, have serious accusations, included mention former president in Panama, and have one person are disappeared, Bernard Ramos, you know?
Yes, yes, I'm okay. Familiar with the case, and you know, frankly, while it got a lot of publicity and it made a lot of people very angry, it's only one of many cases which have occurred in Panama which have never received any press coverage. The interesting thing about the case is that here you take a lucrative business, a gold mine, and by getting inside information ahead of time, ministers in the government were able to buy huge amounts of stock, watch it go up, sell out, and then when the good news that the gold mine had published started to fall apart, defrauded thousands of investors out of millions and millions of dollars. That's securities fraud. And unfortunately, it gave Panama a real black eye.
Okay, sir. Sir, why is so difficult when remember I'm criminal lawyer, and in many times it's necessary for reduce the punishment, the criminals leak or cooperate with authorities, but in many cases the person of this work don't have trust in the Panamanian authorities. Only aclaration. Sorry, aclaración. I don't remember in English what is the aclaración term. En Panamá hay buenos funcionarios. La mayoría son buenos, pero hay casos que no lo son. Sorry, it's in Spanish aclaración.
No, No, I understand. Well,
Okay,
of
excellent.
course,
But
yes.
in some cases, the people of this world prefer cooperate with U.S. authorities, but no is easy contact the U.S. authorities or FBI or other agencies for starting a cooperation with these people. Why?
Well, first of all, remember that unfortunately, government officials in Panama are paid very little. And if they are offered a substantial amount of money to look the other way, it works. So when we have government officials who cooperate with the criminals, somebody who wants to cooperate with the government himself may feel that his cooperation, not only will it not help, but he will expose himself physically to danger by doing so. On the other hand, if he cooperates with the United States or the United Kingdom or some European country, not only will he get immunity, he will probably find a way in which he can financially benefit and even be transferred or moved to that country away from any threats of physical intimidation or death. So since most people assume that senior government officials in Panama are by definition corrupt,
Yes.
they don't choose to cooperate with them for the reason that they don't think it will be successful, and that more importantly, it will directly affect their safety.
Okay. Sir, who is possible? I know two cases. I don't say the names, I don't say the companies for legal reasons. Who is possible a son of ex-former SS of Nazi government moved to Panama in many years ago, many years ago, and starting a law firm. This same person are involved in a cover financial crime in the most biggest robbery in London, still gold. Who is possible this, and who is possible in other case, the son of a person are convicted in Germany for international cocaine traffic, starting a stock house in Panama in few years ago. How is possible this?
Well, unfortunately, with some criminals in a corrupt country, money talks and justice fails. Unfortunately, even to some degree in the United States, people with serious criminal backgrounds can receive immunity in exchange for their cooperation in the prosecution of other individuals. But when it comes to Panama, unfortunately, there have been a number of instances where career criminals or people who have bad backgrounds have been allowed to operate because they have financially enriched certain individuals who will see that they won't be extradited or charged. That's unfortunately, that's all part of the rampant corruption which infects Panama and which unfortunately hurts all the legitimate business people in the country.
Okay. What is the opinion, the idea of in your experience of FBI, DEA, CIA, the government of the US, the idea of Panama? Panama is a failed state, have justice, is safe for the people. What is the opinion of these agencies in your government about Panama in general?
Yeah, in my opinion, from my experience, most of the law enforcement and government agencies see Panama as a safe haven for the proceeds of crime, mainly narcotics trafficking. And as such, they have very little faith that there will be sufficient enforcement within Panama to deter such crime. And when narcotics profits from Colombia and corruption proceeds from Venezuela find a home in Panama and don't appear to ever be interdicted by local law enforcement, they'll have, unfortunately, a very low opinion of law enforcement in Panama and the government in general.
Okay, sir. Sir, what is the in the mind of the people in your profession? Compliance, or you advise many governments and many agencies. Offshore companies, in your opinion, are good or bad?
Well, the whole idea of an offshore company legitimately is to minimize taxes, or perhaps to protect wealth of an individual who does not wish to have his affluence broadcast around the world. But the offshore company, unfortunately, has been prostituted by the criminal elite of the world. And as such, I think that the use of the offshore company, its day is over. And trying to find somebody who can offer you a corporation in another country with bank secrecy and 5% or 0% taxes, that is not seen anymore as a legitimate business benefit. Although, for example, there are some countries in the European Union that do charge a much smaller fee in the way of taxes. Tax planning is different from tax evasion. And many people who come to an offshore financial center like Panama are there purely for the purposes of evading taxes in their own country. So offshore companies have now gotten a bad reputation, and I'm afraid it's only going to get worse as law enforcement in other countries prosecutes individuals for what they do abroad. Okay,
I know about this. Mr. Rijock is an expert in the 80s and the 90s. I remember when I'm a child. It's very known in Panama. In the 80s, not now, in the 80s, the Familia Ochoa, a criminal cartel in Colombia, have a bank in Panama, in middle of the Calle 50, in financial district in Panama. Okay, I don't know in this moment have the same cases. I don't believe it is. You have information, or you hear it's possible organized crime have banks or part of banks in Panama?
No, I think the days of the cartels actually owning a bank in a offshore financial center are gone. However, there is such a thing as a shell bank, a bank which only exists for a minor purpose, isn't really capitalized, and is used briefly for money laundering. But you'll find those banks in the Caribbean and not in Panama.
Okay. Mr. Rijock, my last question, in your opinion, in Panama paper case, start as for whistleblower, mistress, or is possible a foreign intelligence operation? What is your opinion about Panama papers? Start.
Well, most of the Panama papers from my examination dealt with foreign politically exposed persons who were hiding money that they had stolen in their own countries in Panama. And of course, foreign intelligence agencies also appear to have placed operating funds there to hide them from the public at large, and maybe even from their own press. The Panama Papers is a mixed bag, but it did bring out into the open a lot of the dirty business, the dark business of banking, which most bankers don't want the world to see because a lot of it's illegal. Will the Panama Papers result in serious reform in Panama? Well, only time will tell. And it's up to the legitimate business people and professionals to clean the country up so that they can welcome investment again. Otherwise, you're going to see even more recession and depression in Panama as investors leave and none replace them.
Okay, sir. Mr. Rijock, thanks so much for your time, your knowledge, man, your attention. Thank you very, very much, sir.
My pleasure.
I'm sorry, my English is very, very bad.
That's fine. Está suficiente.
Thank you more. Bye-bye, sir.
Thank you.